And from that, I then finished my degree in computer science. I went on to get an MBA. I've worked in telecommunications industry. I've worked in the financial industry. As mentioned, I was actually on the governor's cabinet, working as a secretary of technology for the state of Colorado. Pretty fun gig where you get a chance to actually understand the role of government. When I started, I'm like, oh yeah, there are 3 forms of government. You kind of forget those things. But then once you get close to it, you really understand that there is a purpose, there's a role, and the purpose is to really work with industry, work with higher education to make sure that we have a sustainable economy and we're thinking about all aspects of the economy. So I was exposed to things in that role that were pretty interesting. When I decided to leave the governor's cabinet, I had lots of opportunities, I really did. And I chose to to join the ball team. How many people are familiar with ball? Wow, okay, so that's interesting. So how many folks drink soda? Or teas, or eat food, or Google? Who goes out on Google and looks at Google Earth? All those have implications on ball. Ball was started over 130 years ago by 5 brothers. And the reason why I want to take you through this story is because as we think about ethics and integrity, it really gets to foundational values and the culture that you establish as a corporation. And these 5 guys here started Ball over 130 years ago. And what you're here through the first part of this story is we've done our best to really preserve and enhance the values that they established over 130 years ago. And like I said, I had lots of options, high-tech options, CEO options, et cetera. But when I walked into the door and met with the leadership of Ball, I knew that I wanted to run with these guys because you can tell that the integrity was there, the balance on how they think about employees and the patience they have with managing shareholders' expectations. I knew that's the team that I wanted to run with, not to mention they know how to make money. And so we're going to go through a little bit of the Ball story, and you'll see how everything we do really ties back to uncompromising integrity. So the Ball brothers, a little bit about our company profile. We're roughly a $9 billion company with 15,000 employees spread around the world. We really have 3 product lines. Beverage cans, so Coke, Pepsi, the beer. I know you guys aren't beer drinker, but all those guys are customers of ours. We have a food division that makes different packages, and then we have an aerospace division. So most people in Colorado know Ball because of Ball Aerospace. And aerospace actually is very important. I'll talk about some of the things that we do there. But the other 90% of the business is really in consumer packaged goods. So as I mentioned, metal beverage, and you can see the different products and sizes that we make out there. And we make billions and billions of these around the world. The manufacturing lines, they run about 2,500 cans a minute. I mean, they're just cooking along. And so there's a lot of technology, a lot of know-how, a lot of innovation that goes into making what is a commoditized product, a can. We also do food and household products, so anything that you would see in your pantry, in your garage, underneath your cabinetry, in the bathroom. Those types of products are all metal products that we typically manufacture. On the aerosol side as well. And then as I mentioned, we also have this small little business unit called aerospace. And we do lots of interesting things with sensing technology. I mentioned Google Earth. There was just a recent launch of Worldview 3. When you go out to Google Earth and you're looking at wherever in the world, things that you want to see with incredible definition, Ball is a partner with Digital Globe in those types of technologies. We partner with the U.S. government to keep us safe. So a lot of the technologies that allow us to see what's going on in the battlefield and to make our troops safe, Ball has a large role in those types of technologies. You can see where we are around the world. We probably have 60 different locations here in North America, expanding down into Mexico. We have assets and operations down in Latin America, all throughout Europe and Asia, and growing. A lot of emerging market growth. When you think about how the world is looking to be more like the westernized rest of the world, the development of the middle class, that's what really creates a sweet spot for the products that we offer to our customers. And so we expand where there's customers and where there's markets that are growing. You can see some of the recognized brands of the customers that we serve. You know, that bullet heading up top is very important and relative to what we talk about here. The customers do business with us for the tenure that they have because they trust us. Our brand is recognized around the world. They understand that we do business the right way. We're not going to cut corners. We're not going to compromise. We're going to think about the environment and how we want to be sustainable. And that matters when you think about longevity. I want to transition a little bit because, again, this gets back into the culture and establishing a foundation that's built on the right morals, the right ethics, the right integrity. And this is, again, one of the things that truly attracted me to Ball is this whole notion of uncompromising integrity. Wherever you go in the world, I showed you the map, geographic map of the locations that we serve. Regardless of which facility you walk into, these same norms are established throughout the world. We just finished in September this Who Are We month, where it's really a time for us as leaders to reinforce these values that have been established since the Ball brothers back in the late 1800s. And this is important as you start to think about your future career and the type of corporation or companies that you want to be a part of. Do they have strong values, not just in a PowerPoint slide or sitting up on some type of board in a presentation, but do they really walk the talk? And what I would tell you, this is something that we think about day in and day out, is making sure that we do business the right way. Making sure that in foreign markets where it's normal to maybe pass a couple dollars to make sure that things get through import-export, we don't do that. We do business the right way, and if that means it takes a little bit longer to do it the right way, that's the way we act and operate around the world. And as a result, for the finance types, hopefully this is the biggest note you capture: buy Ball stock. If you don't get that takeaway, then we need to talk about it afterwards. But you can see the S&P 500 and the differential between the return that we've delivered versus the rest of the market. And that's pretty substantial. We are driven by this notion of economic value add. Folks heard of economic value add? It's basically the return on the assets that you have deployed. And when we do that well, our shareholders understand it, and they reward us with stock performance like this. And it's ironic, I've been at Ball now for 10 years, and you can see since I started with the company what's happened to the stock. I'm just saying, okay? I'm just saying, okay? There's a correlation there, a tight correlation. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about information technology and cyber ethics. And to do that, what I want to do is maybe just spend a little bit of time and maybe share what's on my brain throughout the day, throughout the week. And I really wanted to focus it on this whole notion of cyber ethics. You know, if you think about a couple statistics out there, what I've heard is that the data that we have available to us now was created within the last 2 years. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of explosion. That's a lot of information that's out there connected to a lot of devices. And so no matter in which area of life you think about, information technology has an implication on our roles, what we do, how we do our job, et cetera. And so for me, I think about what's out on the horizon, emerging technologies that we should keep our eye on that has an implication on either how we do business, how we make money, how we can make our quality of lives better, et cetera. And I'll go through and take you through some of those. It's pretty interesting as you look at how things are developing and from a corporation standpoint, how we consider those advancements to bring those into what we do and how we operate. Then there's this whole thing called the end user. You know, there's coupled with data stewardship, because information is so available, because the iPhone has been so successful and other devices, people want more and they're consuming it, and they want the same user feel that they get on the iPhone, similar to what you get in the office. And so balancing this whole ability to access and do business in a very easy and seamless way, there's a balance between risk and reward, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And of course that gets into how we protect your information, our customers' information, the data that we have. We capture it, we store it, we use it in the right ways. And that gets into some of the ethical dilemmas that we'll think about as we walk through this conversation. Of course, you know, money matters, IT economics. You've probably heard of outsourcing and things like that, and making sure that you're balancing all these things and doing it with your best financial ability. That's something that's always top of mind. And then finally, it's really all about the people. It's all about the talent. It's all about the employees. You know, any company, any investor can go buy the assets that we have deployed, right? It doesn't take much money. For $100 million, I know that sounds like a lot, but for $100 million, you can build a plant and make cans. So what makes us successful more than others' ability to go deploy that capital, at the end of the day, it's the people that we have deployed. And so resource management and making sure that we're getting the most out of folks, understanding that there are new differences between what motivates you as the next generation versus perhaps my generation or the older generation. We think about that constantly. And so I'm going to walk through this a little bit and talk about each of these areas. Maybe. So let's jump into emerging technologies real quick. So, big data. Have you heard big data? Is that a concept, a term that you've heard of? Has anyone heard of big data? You know, the reality is I started in computer science. That was in the mid-'80s kind of deal. And what I would tell you is that the fundamental architecture of computers, it has not changed in 40 years. It's the same thing. What has changed is things have gotten smaller, they've gotten faster, they've gotten cheaper, and there's more of it. There's more pervasiveness. But there is something with this big data concept that means something as you start to think about information technology and ethics, right? So the pictures up here really show this bottom left is a capture of the WorldView 3. The WorldView 3 satellite was launched probably 4, 5, 6 weeks ago or something like that with Digital Globe. The imagery from that satellite, basically, if you were to go to Coors Field, you can probably dial into home plate and have pretty fine granularity on that particular, at that level of detail. So you can dial in, and you can jump out there. This is all online. You can see some of the imagery. It's pretty amazing. Of course, there's tons of satellites out there that are passing information. Some of it is for commercial use, some of it's for private use, et cetera. But the point is there's a lot of data that's coming down, and how we think about this data is how do you use that data to be smarter about doing business, right? So I mentioned one of our product lines is we make food cans. So if I can take imagery data come on off these satellites, and feed that into algorithms that help me understand crop yield and the growth of crops and how much we can expect to harvest, what I can do with that is then predict how much working capital, how much money I need to put out there to meet customer demands. If I can pass that information to our customers and they can be smart about how they plan their resources, it's worth a ton of money. That's a very positive use of predictive analytics. But then there's maybe not so good uses of this information as well, and we'll talk about that also. Questions on that? I put this image here on the bottom right just to highlight the amount of detail you can get. I wasn't able to blow this up, but that's a picture of a gigantic swimming pool. And interestingly, there was actually a Snickers bar floating in that swimming pool. If I could dial it in, you could see that Snickers bar. It's pretty tight detail. You guys. We'll come back to that. Here's another area of emerging technology that's interesting, and I'd be curious here how much is true. You probably don't realize just how much sensing technology is out there and available today. The top right corner is a picture of a manufacturing process with equipment. And what we do is we instrument our manufacturing environment with different sensing technology, whether it's visual inspection, so I know immediately if a product is out of spec, I can fire that off the line so it doesn't go downstream to our customers, right? So we capture so much data on those manufacturing lines. We use that data then to better understand the line performance. We can then do things like anticipate maintenance and increase asset utilization, things like that. But you're also starting to see in the emerging technology world data chips. You know, folks are today now starting to implant chips, and they're carrying information that you can retrieve with these chips through the RFID technology. A lot of states have basically made that illegal for you to do in a mandatory fashion, but it's there. The technology is available. It's possible for us to do that. And then you also have, as you've probably seen with the commercials where it's Nike and things like that, a lot of sensing technology that you can use to help you with whatever your objectives are from a cardiovascular standpoint or what have you. So sensing technologies are everywhere. When you're walking down the street, when you're in restaurants, wherever you go, sensing technologies are pervasive. And the question is, how do we use them? And the question for you is, should you know that they exist? Should you know that the sensing technologies is capturing information about you? And then what's happening with that information? Question.
How secure are these? How do you maintain their security in their data transmission?
So the question is, how secure are these systems? How secure is really, the information today? And I think everyone probably is aware of the stories that are out there, whether it's Home Depot and the amount of customer information that was stolen from Home Depot. JP Morgan Chase just recently, I think there were 76 million customers' information that was taken. The stories go on and on and on. The reality is they're not as secure as they need to be. And again, this is, you should think about, the type of information that's being captured about you, not just as you're walking around, but when you're online doing things, when you're using your phone, when you're banking with an institution. These are the right questions to ask. How do I know that you're protecting my information and that information is not getting into the hands of the others? And I'll talk about that a little bit because I do spend a lot of time on this very topic. We have tremendous intellectual property. If you think about aerospace and allowing that information to get in the hands of the wrong people, that's a no-no. So we spend a lot of time thinking about information security, data governance, et cetera. Here's another one that I think is very interesting, and I purposely put sort of juxtapositions up here, if you will. Artificial intelligence and robots. Robots have been around for a while, and they're becoming more pervasive. So drones are a form of robots. How many folks have a drone? You don't have a drone yet? Yeah, I know there's a couple folks that have drones in here, right? We use robots for routine tasks. So when we finish with a manufacturing process, I could pick that finished good up and move it to another part of the warehouse, whatever. It's a very repetitive task, and typically that's where you see robots. When things are becoming a lot more advanced, Watson, have you heard of IBM's computer Watson? So Watson sort of gained notoriety through game shows. I think it was Jeopardy! Now no human has the ability to beat Watson. Watson's built on artificial intelligence. And now what Watson is doing, Watson is actually going to medical school. So with the thought being that computers can store information, retrieve information, and through analytics, predictive analytics, make a better prognosis or diagnostic on a situation than a doctor can, more consistently, et cetera. And so you're starting to see artificial intelligence move into mainstream areas of our society. And when you start to couple that with then robotics, now you're starting to see some interesting capabilities out there. So if you go out and Google, like, for example, predictive policing and the use of robots in different situations that may be dangerous, applying these two together is a very interesting trend that we keep our eye on. From a corporation standpoint, it's truly about productivity. We have to be competitive with China. We have to be competitive with India. We have to be competitive with others. And so making sure that we're applying these technologies in the right way so that we're competitive, we keep our manufacturing facilities open, we employ folks, that's important. Safety is also another factor into why we use things like that. So artificial intelligence and robots, lots of challenges as you think about the information and the uses of those things. So cloud computing, that's probably out there pervasive. Folks heard of cloud computing? This is a big deal. And it's a fundamental game changer because of the underlying economics. Essentially, what's happened over the last couple decades, there was tremendous capital spent on fiber optic networks. And right now, the world is connected. There's still dark spots here and there, in emerging markets, et cetera. But for the most part, everyone's connected. Everyone has a device. I believe there's more devices now, cell phone devices, than there are human beings. So we're all connected. Where this is headed now is to the cloud. So now that we're connected, the question is how do we change the game so that if you as a small business owner, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to start up a new venture, you can do that. And you can do that without putting capital out there. You can buy services online. So the computing power that you used to have that was dedicated to you or to your business, it's now all in a shared environment called the cloud. There's this whole thing called virtualization, which says I can take one computer and parse it out, and everyone shares the use of that computer. So that's the concept. It's a game changer. And what's driving that is people want to be connected, whether it's from a Facebook standpoint or if it's Alibaba. I don't know if you're familiar with Alibaba. It's a new online retail. I can buy products and services around the world. I can collaborate on new ideas, and I can do that all virtually. That's what the cloud, coupled with people's ability to connect and to partner and to collaborate, big trends there. Some of the information security concerns fall into once you have someone's asset storing your data, how are they protecting it? Are they capable of protecting it? What happens in different situations when the government says, hey, I need to see this? Well, you don't have control over that. Someone else now has control over that. And so cloud is definitely a promising trend, but we need to think about how we're being good stewards of the information and data that's being stored and captured in the cloud. So there's new demands. I talked about that a little bit. I want to walk through this a little bit. Again, when you look at social media, and I'm sure everyone's doing Facebook or some version of Facebook out there today, right? Twitter or something or another. Social media is capturing a lot of information about us. And today, if you were to hand your SSN over to someone, you just wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't go into, a gas station and say, here, have my SSN. We all know that that is sensitive information. It's unique. It identifies you. And what I'll show you here is when you start to put different data points out there in cyber, you've got the Facebook social networking. You've got what's going on with your mobile device. We're looking at GPS technology that's also adding another layer of intelligence in terms of where you are, the things that you're visiting, et cetera, coupled with location-based technologies. And then finally, I think the number is, on average, your picture is taken 13 times a day and you don't know it. Realize that? So facial technology, facial recognition. The point here is when I pull all those together, coupled with email, what I've done is I've just created your digital DNA, right? So I would argue that information is just as valuable as your social security number. And people today have the ability to go create your digital DNA, and they can do things with that. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that they can do, good and bad. Make sense? So data stewardship. This is sort of the last area and gets back to the question that was asked. So what are we doing about this? For me, as a chief information officer of the company, this is probably my primary job, is to think about information. From the time information is created, who gets to access that information, how it's used, and what do we do when you're done with it, right? So there is no delete key anymore, but we need to think about how you purge data, delete data, so it's gone forever. A lot of people don't realize that when you delete something, it's not really gone. So how we manage that is through these different areas here. It's top of mind every day that we're protecting information. I have teams that are constantly monitoring for bad actors that are trying to access us. There are, have you heard of advanced persistent threats? It's kind of an interesting scenario that I want to talk you through so you can think about how the Home Depot situation's happening or how the JP Morgan Chase situation happened. It's not the old school approach of how we build perimeter security like Fort Knox and barbed wires with security guards and we keep the bad people out. It's a different ball game. It's a digital ball game. And how it's happening is because of us as end users. So we'll talk about that just briefly. So data privacy, identity management, that's a big deal. Identity management is a two-edged sword. In order for me to let you have access, I need to know who you are. So there's a certain level of credentialing and there's a certain level of trust that you need to place on me as a steward of the information in order to allow these things to happen. And then finally, making sure people understand the dangers that are out there and how to act and behave so that we don't expose our data to the wrong people. So here's an example. We have a quarterly board meeting where we get together with our board of directors and talk about the performance of the company, and then we have special topics. In fact, this month we're over in Europe for our beverage division, going through a review in Berlin and Prague, I think is where we are, meeting with customers, et cetera. And in our last board meeting, I presented on risk management. There's always this, what about cybersecurity, what's going on, because it's top of mind for everyone. So what I did is to help that audience understand what we're talking about in terms of the risk, pull together a scenario. And this is a real life example that kind of gets back to the digital DNA. So what we did was, you can go out to our website today and you can pull information, do research on any individual, right? And in this case here, it's like, you know what? Ann Scott, she is the head of investor relations. So she maintains a pretty close relationship with the executive committee, as well as other key stakeholders, that makes her a pretty interesting target if you're trying to introduce some bad things into a corporation to steal information. So I'm able to get that information about Ann Scott, and she's not here. Don't tell her I used her name up here if you wouldn't mind, okay? She probably wouldn't be happy with that. No, I actually did clear it with her, so we get that information. I start to pull the pieces together, and lo and behold, where I end up is I can craft an email to Ann Scott. I can CC the CEO of the company, do it in a very eloquent way that makes it look like it's totally legitimate, that will then oftentimes prompt someone to take action. And taking action is basically clicking on a hyperlink. The hyperlink looks all legitimate, everything's tied together. Once someone clicks on that hyperlink, what happens is there's a payload that's delivered on their PC with malware. That malware then can do all sorts of things. Advanced persistent threats is sort of a combination of malware that's infiltrating the environment, going and finding out things, passwords, for the most elevated access, you can get those passwords. And so when you think about a Home Depot or JP Morgan, it's not so much that someone is actually hacking into a computer and stealing things. What they do is, through social engineering called phishing, they get you to deliver the payload for them. And this is the challenge with why you see so many data breaches occurring, is because we aren't really savvy enough to know. We kind of get in a hurry. Things are going on. We click on things we don't know. Now, there's things we could do about it, and those things that we are doing about it, but this is the typical way that you see these type of breaches occurring, is through this social engineering process. So as I mentioned with you all, I can go do the same thing. We actually hire folks to try and replicate this, to help us understand what we need to do different to educate and train folks on this type of threat that's out there. Does that make sense? So that's social engineering. Let me give you another example. So what I was able to discover here, this is what I know about this audience. This all happened in the last 24 hours. There are 8.5 questionable and probably illegal downloads that occurred from here, the folks in this room. How do I know this, right? $377 spent on caffeine. It's pretty realistic data here. 3,000 text messages. Interesting, there were 3 sets of phone numbers that were staying in close proximity to well after midnight last night. I'm not sure what was going on there, right? But we know this kind of information. 47 folks passed by the main library, right? 5 individuals exceeded the speed limit on the way here. Actually, that was probably me. I'll admit it. I had to get here. 11 people watched the same movie. 2 individuals lost interest on slide 2. Who was that? That's good. It's not true, but absolutely possible for people to know this, right? This is the world that we live in. These are the things I think about on a daily basis, not just with my role at Ball, making sure we're protecting our employees' data, our customers' data, et cetera, but I think about it in the context of my everyday life and the things that I'm doing and how I'm exposed, and how much do you really want people to know about you? How much do you want the government to know about you, et cetera? It's out there, and you have to think about that. And so the question is, what are we doing about it, right? So there's really 2 areas here that I think about. And from a Ball perspective, we have a very balanced approach when it comes to sustainability. And from a sustainability, we're saying we've been around for over 130 years, and we absolutely expect to be here for another 130 years. And so taking this balanced approach of thinking about our shareholders, thinking about the communities that we serve, and also about the environment, that's what drives the decision making and how we allocate capital, how we deal with risk, how we think about employees, et cetera. This is really, and I put institutions because it's not just corporations. It's for-profit, nonprofit, it's higher education, it's government. We have to think about the balanced approach in terms of how we make decisions and go after opportunities. And then I had the slide on there that's really about fostering a value-based culture. And this gets into the integrity and the ethics, and it starts from the top, setting the tone at the top, and making sure that's not something that's done in a superficial way, but it's truly what we believe, it's what we breathe, it's how we walk, it's how we talk every day throughout the world, 15,000 employees. That same value-based approach is really a responsibility of most institutions. And then, again, the conversation around this whole explosion of data. What are we doing about it? There needs to be effective governance to make sure that we're being good stewards with the data that we hold. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of things that we can continue to do as a nation. You know, our competitiveness is really not so much about manufacturing, but it is about the information age. It's about innovation. And so capturing information and using that information in the right way to continue to be global leaders, that's important. But there's also a risk with that when you're capturing that information. And so making sure we're good stewards with that information is absolutely important. And then from an individual standpoint, this is really for you all. There's nothing I can say up here today that's going to, help you, with your morals, your values. That's, you either have it or you don't. And hopefully you have that foundation, okay? And if you do have that foundation, then the question is, what are you doing about it? When you're seeing things that, just don't feel right, or if you're being pressured to do something in your job. Marketing is a very interesting area because, marketing wants to be the first to come up with a way to get that uplift in product sales, right? So if I could pull information today that's maybe gray borderline on what I should be doing, think about that. Is that doing the right thing? Just because it's possible doesn't necessarily make it right. So that's the second point. What's the difference between what's possible and what's right? And then finally, it's all about being a leader. The topic of sustainability, the topic of cyber ethics, how we're using information to help our companies, to help us be successful, tremendous opportunities there. And you have an opportunity to be a leader in that regard. Everyone here, including me, we have the responsibility to make sure if we see something that's not right, speak up. Challenge the status quo. Why are we doing this? Lots of jobs out there, so don't ever be concerned about the fact that if I speak up, then my job is at risk. It's all about doing the right thing, and that cyber ethic conversation is there's so much information, and you're going to operate in the gray. So knowing when to raise your hand and say, I'm going to question that, that's very important, and that's all about being a leader. So with that, I'm going to pause there and open it up, because I know I went pretty fast over lots of slides, but I'm happy to talk about anything from the NFL to whatever it is that you want to discuss, right? What you got? Back row.
Yeah, you had a question regarding, it was kind of on one of your slides about RFID technologies. And you kind of mentioned on the slide a little bit about inventory management. And I know with RFID currently there's lots of problems with security, as it's all kind of public knowledge. Has there been any headway, or does Ball do any advanced work with improving RFID so it could be used for inventory purposes? Or could you share any of your thoughts on that?
When you say security, say more about that.
Well, basically for RFID, a lot of it's very open. It's not encrypted. It also can be easily duplicated. For about $30 on eBay, you could buy the technology to duplicate an ID, and it's not very, fraud can
secure.
easily be achieved.
Right. Yeah, and I would say, I'm going to answer that question in kind of an indirect way.
Okay.
So if you look at what I call the point of bind in the technology stack, meaning where do we need to invest more, where do we need to innovate? I put that slide up there that started with a map of the globe and talked about connectivity. I mean, we deployed tons of fiber. I mean, it's amazing what you get now in bandwidth. I get 10 meg at home. I mean, I'm old school, but 10 meg, I mean, that was a lot of bandwidth. Now it's just, you just take it for granted kind of deal, right? So that's not the issue, right? Hardware, they're all network computers, right? So that's not the issue, right? You know, computers can move pretty fast. The issue is software. So in order, you're right, to encrypt, it's going to require the software industry to innovate to catch up with the rest of the stack. And so we can put policies and mandates out there that it has to do this, but what it will do oftentimes is stifle innovation, because as end users, it's just not acceptable. It's not going to move at the pace that you want to play. So there's that balance of we need to allow the innovation to catch up with the other advancements. That's one side of it. The other side of it is really understanding the appropriate use. If you know it's not secure, why deploy it in an unsecure way, right? And that gets back to, again, our responsibilities. You know, if I'm developing a product and I'm using RFID and I know that that RFID is transmitting your social security numbers and it's not secure, shame on me, right? So yeah, RFID is, it's still, you know, the price points are getting there, no doubt. And what you'll see because of that is more pressure placed on the software industry to catch up so that when you're encrypting, it actually works like it's supposed to based on your user expectations.
Would you be willing to share this slide presentation with us and email you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything in particular? Yeah. No, absolutely. I will share that. And I can also provide some references as well. There's some very interesting articles, books on cyber ethics, emerging technology and ethics. Pretty interesting. And you have a lot of futurists, and then you have folks that the big brotherists, and it's pretty interesting to really know what things are happening today. These aren't future things. These are capabilities that exist right now. Pretty interesting to know. Another question. I'm sorry.
I was wondering if that volume kind of required ethics, or you were mentioning the data stewardship, kind of how people can avoid having data issues. Do you guys have training programs that you require employees to do?
Yes, tons of them. Seems like I'm constantly taking compliance training, I swear, right? But it's needed, it's necessary, and I do think we've got to figure out how to refresh it, because over time, I mean, if you're a new employee, then it's like, okay, I'm paying attention to everything, but after your 10th iteration, not so much, right? So yes, we do. We have annual compliance training on everything from harassment in the workplace to environmental health safety to what we have to do just from a legal perspective. There's training. In my area of responsibility, we launched education training and awareness specifically on the information security, data privacy. And so this next go around 2015, we're going to weave that into some type of annual compliance training and maybe jazz it up a little bit so that, you know, people actually are paying attention, because it's, in order for me to be successful with my information security strategy, I need you to help me do that. So it's under, you know, the dependency is we have to train our employees effectively to know how to do that. Good question. What else?
What was the biggest threat, I guess, you guys had to deal with at Ball Corporation? And like, did it materialize, and what was like your response?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question. So from a global risk management standpoint, what are sort of the top 10 items? And they kind of change over time. One, though, that is out there, a couple. There's, you know, the consumer attitude and behavior is changing. So things like obesity, which is tied to sugar, often is contained in the products that our customers sell. So this trend of sugar taxation or eliminating sodas out of schools, you know, all that does is shrink volumes, and it forces the customers to innovate differently to continue to grow their business. So that's a big area. But there's another one that we were dealing with, it's still out there, It's called bisphenol A, BPA, and it's a constituent chemical that goes into the coating of the can, the inside coating of the can, with there being assertions that it's cancer causing, and there's no scientific data behind it. But in the political cycle that we're in, everyone wants to find a platform and run on that platform objective. And these aren't issues that are unique to the domestic U.S. France, for example, they're big on these types of things, or throughout the world, not so much in China, that's a different issue. But typically in Europe and the U.S., these type of societal concerns are things that we deal with. And we work with industry associations to really understand, educate the stakeholders, and do the right thing. Now, we do have BPA-free products, and those are available. What we found is there's all this hype on BPA, and then it kind of goes away. And we can move to BPA, but it's going to cost more. And if it costs me more, it costs the customer more, and guess what? It's going to cost you more when you go buy those products that I showed you. So we're ready employees, and we do that, you know, when we're asked to. But that's just an example of risk that impacts the industry that we think about. Good question. Probably some of the other risks, and maybe for the finance folks, you know, we live in a pretty volatile world, and the economies around the world are pretty anemic. I mean, we're doing pretty good in Colorado, but there's, you know, a lot of challenges when you look at it. And so when you look at the input costs, our supplies of metal and other raw materials, things like that, there's a lot of volatility. Energy prices, gas, oil, things like that, and managing those commodities through hedging practices and things like that, that's something that we think about. And so, again, it requires information to be intelligent about what your position should be on things like that, is another example. Good question. Question?
Talk about sustainability and environmental issues. What technologies is Ball implementing to, you know, be more environmentally conscious?
Great question. So sustainability is, again, if I were in school, I would definitely pay attention to the sustainability conversation. It's big. It's not going away. You know, global warming, the debate on global warming and what we're doing with Mother Earth, and some of the images that you see out there, these are big topics. And so the question is what are we doing about it? I took out a couple slides because I didn't want to brag too much, but if you go to the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, we actually are voted #1 in 2 categories for 2 years in a row, the second time around. So not just walking the talk, we're doing it out there. And so we're recognized when we look at the energy emissions, looking at water usage, waste, safety. Diversity is actually another aspect of it. Some of the things that we do about it, in order for us to convert metal into a can, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of water. And so the amount of water, fresh water, that's required in order for us to do this is problematic. We have a plant over in Golden, and that's where you see those Alumatech bottles that are out there. We make those and some other things. Big plant. Well, we're tapped out on our ability to pull any more water out of the system. So what we've got to do is figure out how to make it a closed loop system to where it's zero waste. Where what water comes in goes back out, kind of thing. So we have different plants around the world that are making advancements with water usage. So the reduction where there's like 2/3 reduction in the amount of water that's used, things like that. There's a lot of technologies that go into those sorts of things. I also mentioned some of the sensing technology that's on the manufacturing lines that makes us more intelligent about air usage, energy consumption, things like that. We're collecting data. It's moved from what was a traditional analog manufacturing process to truly a digital process. So visual inspection systems, we capture data. Anytime a machine changes state, we look at different thresholds throughout that process to make sure that everything is finely tuned so that we're running as efficient as possible. So from a sustainability, those things are important. Air emissions around the world are of concern, of course, and so there's lots that we do to make sure we keep those constituents out of air, a lot of things like that. But it's sustainability, one of the things from an information standpoint is just your ability to capture what's going on, and that's not an easy thing. So if you think about how you capture information about energy uses from sources over here and information over there, it's pretty disparate. And so the ability to bring that information together so you could analyze it and then figure out actions on how you could get better, that's another one of the elements of our sustainability strategy that I have specific responsibility for. Good question. One more, here. I'll come back to you.
As far as general, I guess, IT question, do you find that it's difficult at times to balance stakeholder expectation versus the reality of what you can do with the technology at your disposal?
Earlier in my career, I did. The question is, do I find it difficult to balance user demands with the realities of what's possible? And earlier in my career, I'd say that was the case. Now I just say no. No, I'm just kidding. This is not happening, kind of thing. No. Yeah, again, there's always this. There's always the next technology or new, the iPhone 6, for example, right? I just rolled out iPhone 5s, okay, and then iPhone 6 come out the next month. So you got folks showing up like, I want an iPhone 6. It's like, you can absolutely have an iPhone 6. If you go down to the Apple Store and buy you an iPhone 6, you can have all that you want, kind of deal. So there's always the next generation of capability out there. And from an information ethics standpoint, it's, what I'm trying to do is balance the risk of data loss with the end user experience that you're looking for. And that's kind of the balancing act with, of course, resources and costs underpinning that. So it's a constant battle. You know, we live in sort of a theory of constraints environment, right? So there's always more demand than we have supply. There's always more requests for new than we have capital to deploy. And so managing that through a portfolio management process where we define what are the needs, what are the priorities, what's it worth, what's the return on investment. We use that as a filter to determine where we place our priorities. I also started a couple of years ago a new group that they're non-IT. I wanted folks that don't speak the language of IT. We always can easily justify why we've done things. It makes total logic sense. It looks good, smells good, all that kind of stuff. But it may not work for the end user. So we have this end user adoption group. Their job is to go out with the sales force, go right along with them, see how they interact when they're out of the office and they're presenting to customers, when they're in the hotels, when they're traveling. How does technology really work for you? Bring that intelligence back into the group, and then we figure out, okay, how do we make it better? So yeah, that's the constant demand, and that's why I put as one of my items that I think about it. It's really maintaining that balance. To help? Good. There's a question.
So I was wondering, you talked about the fact that ethics is based on like the foundation and how you were started, but in what ways has it transformed from that, and how do you work through that process of changing your ethics to stay in tune with technology and modern problems?
Yeah, the question is how has our focus on ethics evolved, right? Because the world is evolving, things are becoming more complex, and technology is more pervasive. How are we using the foundation of our ethics to guide what we do today and how we do it? I would say that even though technology is more pervasive and readily available, and it's extended out further than we ever thought possible, I think the fundamental principles of ethics have not changed. They have not. There are things that are out there that were socially unacceptable that over time become socially acceptable, and that's kind of a little bit of a different debate. Stem cell research, for example, I'm not saying it is socially acceptable, but there's sort of, when you think about ethics, there's this extrinsic and intrinsic aspect of it. And when you think about ethics and morals, the extrinsic says that basically we don't like the outcome that this new innovation can yield. We don't like that. Then there's an intrinsic that says we just don't like that, period, because it goes against our religious beliefs or cultural beliefs or whatever it is. And so those are things that have to get debated in a certain way. But what I would say is, as institutions, as corporations, as individuals, when you think about morals, principle-based ethics, they really haven't changed. Technology hasn't, and that's a key message, to know that don't use technology as an excuse to do something that you wouldn't normally do. Do not. It has not changed. And so the foundation of the values that were established back in the 80s, you know, maybe the words have changed because our marketing folks helped us say a little bit more modern kind of deal, but the underlying intent, I would argue, is still the same. Maybe others would disagree with that. Question?
Have you made any mistakes while working at Monfort?
Never have I ever made any mistakes. We don't make mistakes. Mistakes are unacceptable. No. Many mistakes, you know, and it's and that's an interesting cultural value as well, is what I would tell you, because we want to innovate. And if you're truly innovating, then by default, you're going to make some mistakes, right? If everything is done perfectly right, I'm not talking about the manufacturing process, but in terms of trying new things that's going to better who we are and what we do, if you're moving ahead of the pack, then you're going to make mistakes. And what I found, and this is just a personal thing, is just admit your mistakes. If you're wrong, you're wrong. I had an interaction last week in a meeting, and afterwards I thought about it. I'm like, you know, I could have handled that differently. In my position, I'm one of 10 of the senior most people in the organization. I don't have to go back and say anything. It stays as it is. But that's wrong. That's not, again, sustainable throughout the organization. If people see me admit my mistakes, guess what? I would expect them to do the same thing. And so without getting into specifics, there's tons of mistakes, not just at ball, but with parenting. I've got 3 teens, trust me. And if I could do one thing over again, I never would have bought the kids a car, okay? Never would have done that. Never. Make them pay their own way, I'm telling you. Make them invested in that process. So tons of mistakes, but that's how you grow. That's learn and grow is through mistakes. And admit them. People think more of you in terms of your character by acknowledging, hey, that was a mistake, you know? So learning the perspective from others and using that for your growth, I think, is important. It's a good question.
So you brought up the digital DNA and kind of alluded to its use, but how do you perceive, or how do corporations use that information to capture better while keeping their users informed and understand of what they're doing? I feel like that's not necessarily happening right now.
So digital DNA for employees or digital DNA for market opportunities?
Well, that's the thing. That's what those people are marketing.
Okay, so the question is how are we using information or the digital DNA for our employees, for our critical stakeholders? Fair enough? I would say that the majority of what I do every day, all day, was that last box around talent management, talent development. To me, what gets me excited is not so much the next whiz-bang technology. That's cool. You know, I'm still a little geeky. I like getting in those conversations, and they like to kick me out every now and then, right? But what excites me more is this whole notion of highly effective teams. To see individuals or teams go do things that no one thought was possible, that is super exciting. Whether it's in a corporate setting or even, I used to coach basketball. I had this basketball team that was made up of kids that none of them played high school basketball. But we would go to these tournaments and we would win some tournaments because these guys knew their role, they played within the boundaries, and we accomplished things no one ever thought was possible. So talent management is probably where I spend all my time thinking. I've got a big conference coming up in November to bring all of my leadership team together around the world. And the whole theme is managing a digital workforce. How are we getting the most out of our folks? So philosophically, that's where I'm at. That's what drives me. We're also getting smarter through analytics about our employees and what motivates employees. So we take a biannual employee engagement survey because we want to know and have a pulse on what's going on. Engaged employees are motivated employees, they're productive employees. And so the employee engagement survey gives us the intelligence to say, here are the actions that we need to take to make sure that we have that engaged workforce, that balance. Some of the analytics we start to get into, and this is starting to introduce some of the industrial psychology into even how we hire when we're looking for certain positions. What really is the DNA makeup of the leader that we're looking for? And so applying some industrial psychology to the competencies that we're looking for, not necessarily technical or functional, but it's really the soft skills side of it that says this person here will really make a good leader, a good manager because of these competencies that we know are successful and tie back to our values. So we do that, and then from a staff perspective, then we have individual development plans, and these are things that we've been working on for a while. They don't just happen overnight, but I'm a strong believer that everyone has a development opportunity, and so everyone as a part of the performance planning process should have something as a goal in terms of future development. And so we work on that. Some are bigger than others kind of deal. Mine is pretty big, in case you didn't know. But yeah, we do believe that. And then finally, the data that we capture in the systems, we are just starting to tap into what is it telling us about our workforce and how we ought to be thinking about it. There's a follow-on to that, and that's also, we think about if you think about information security, the folks that I compete against, they are well funded. They're spending billions of dollars on their ability to hack into my system. So regardless of what my budget is, I can't compete with that, right? It's just not possible. So it really requires you to partner with the right players in order to win that game. And so talent management extends beyond just the boundaries of my employee base or Ball, also partnering with other trusted entities that could help us when we're dealing with those things. So making sure I have the known core competencies and skill sets that are required on my staff, and then buying or partnering for those others that we're just not competitive, we're not able to keep up with the game in some areas. That's a part of the overall equation as well.
You think of the data, in order to use data from a person collected on their digital DNA, do you think that ethically there should be consent for that individual before it can be used?
I agree. Completely agree. However, the examples I just showed you, you can go get that information. And there's a lot more information sources out there that you can add to that, even from government sources. Again, it is absolutely possible to create digital DNA today. And so you're spot on. And the question is, what do you do about it? What do we do about it? Right? From a public policy standpoint, from an advocacy standpoint, from an education standpoint, what we're teaching in our classes, completely agree with you. And it's only going to grow. Okay, so let me leave you with this. What our goal is from an executive standpoint at Ball is we want to absolutely be known as the best place to work, period. Okay, that is what we're about, kind of deal. And if you're not aware of this, we have intern programs that we sponsor every year. I think we bring on 60 to 80 interns every year. And that process actually starts now. So if you jump out on ball.com, there's somewhere out there you'll find intern program. And go take a look at that. You get paid. We actually house you for like 10 or 12 weeks in the summer. They work together and do fun things like launch rockets, but you get to work a meaningful job while you're at Ball, whether it's in legal or finance, accounting, or marketing, or as engineers, or you name it. We have wonderful intern opportunities at Ball. So I would encourage you, as you're thinking about what you do next, take a look at Ball. Ball is a pretty cool company. When you first think of it, it's like cans. There's a lot going on. More so than cans, right? Yeah, exactly. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. Hopefully there was something shared that you resonate with. And my information is up there. That is my email address. You know, it's kind of funny, you talk about how things advance. We used to use kind of first name, last name as your email address, and then we got away from that. But I find it interesting now when you go back to your first name, last name, nobody thinks of that anymore. So how do y'all email you? It's Leroy.Williams@ball.com. Really? So feel free to reach out. I'll get the presentation sent over to the right folks. And if you have questions or you just want to ping me or whatever, don't hesitate to do so. Thank you.